All right, good morning, people. Glad to see all you gluttons for punishment are out here today. Uh, hey, let's talk about Bitcoin dominance. And you can see the chart there. I got a weekly pulled up. Went ahead and took a longer view of it. Wanted to kind of get a sense for maybe where we're at, where we're going. Basically, and I'll get rid of the drawings real quick so you can kind of see a little more cleanly. Um, I mean, this structure right here, as far as this part goes, it looks an awful lot like XRP before it tanked. What ended up happening is you got this big rounded top, then it did a second rounded top, almost like an inverted cup and handle, really, and then it just shot down into the ground. So we got going here, who knows? But kind of looking at it, big thing I wanted to really point out is that bringing the drawings back in, these two vertical lines represent the end of the last bull run. And in that very, very short period of time, it looks like, 4 weeks, basically, that was the end of that bull run. So if we assume that our bull run has not yet completed, if we can safely make that assumption, then really what I'm looking at is this is us right here, or at least comparatively speaking. Um, and just kind of looking at the structure of that, obviously had a few weeks up, down, and then it just shot up for 2 months straight. As far as that part goes, right now we're basically upwards for the last 2 months. So I mean, those things are lining up. We've talked about it before. This market is dragging out a lot longer than the prior bull markets. I've seen some articles recently suggesting November of next year will be when it potentially resolves. So, who knows for sure? But at the end of the day, we know that it is taking longer. So, if this is already 2 months here, this is about 4 months here total. Let's assume that this will continue on for a couple more months of potentially, vastly upward movement. I find it interesting that we've got a death cross on the weekly chart here, and yet really it's not pushing it down that bad, and it has crossed. Now, that being stated, you look at the stochastic RSI here; it's in overbought territory. It's still a buy at the moment, but it does appear that it's prepared to curl down. Now, let's assume for 1 second that it does. The last few times it got to overbought territory and curled down. We've got some different scenarios we could look at here. Here it curled down and yet somehow only went down for 2 weeks and then 4 more weeks straight up before the huge capitulation that led to the big alt season we've seen so far. Um, but that all being stated, I mean, it looks like this is a good weekly support resistance level. It doesn't have a ton of tests from underneath. One test here and then a second here. Do we get rejected there? That'd be great. I'd love it. So maybe we only get to about 49 approximately on Bitcoin dominance and then get just absolutely, you know, see that get absolutely beat down. That'd be great. Do I think that's going to happen? Tough to say. The volume nodes here would suggest that it's much more likely that we see something push all the way up to this level here in the 58 range. But this line had been support previously, so it could turn into resistance. So who knows? Maybe we get rejected at 53-ish. Maybe we get rejected at 49. Really, we're just going to have to see how this all plays out. But the MACD Momo indicator is starting to curl to the positive direction. Granted, again, this is a weekly chart, so it's already been going upwards for several weeks, but should be interesting. But again, the main thing I wanted to convey was, comparatively speaking, this versus this. We may still have several more weeks of garbage to deal with, if not months, potentially. But then, if we get to this point at some stage down the line, obviously we could potentially look at a few months worth of ridiculous price action. So looking forward to that day. But in the meantime, this is what we're dealing with there. Let's talk about Bitcoin itself. Um, really not a ton to say there. The biggest thing I would say to you is that we've got this descending channel that we've been operating in realistically since we peaked out on the 29th of June. Been really kind of working in a descending channel. That took us out of this rising channel. The rising channel itself, we still have not hit a measured move based on falling out of that pattern. And I'll just draw it here for us, right there, boom. We should be down somewhere in $29,000 range by the time we're done messing with this, with falling out of here. The only thing that the only thing that keeps me from thinking that that's gonna happen is that we keep finding support on the way down. We're pretty oversold in a lot of cases on a lot of these charts. And again, I'll go ahead and get rid of the drawings for a minute, but like, here's a rising wedge on the hourly, which is completely contradictory to the actual pricing action, interestingly enough. So, I could draw out some lines here, show you that it is in fact a rising wedge here, but again, we've got a falling wedge on a pricing action. So if I take that into account, my assumption would be that this still has further to fall. And if you look at all of this volume here, really what I would say to you in this regard is that, we spent so much time going from, somewhere in the, let's call it, really even the $11,000 range. Bitcoin basically built no market structure between basically 11,000 and 32,000. And really, I'm sure that if we looked at this chart several weeks back, none of this was here. This was, we went into price discovery basically from here almost. So there's just been no market structure created, and now it's being created. Now all of a sudden the market structure is putting a ton of overhead pressure still. So, looking at the chart, you'd assume that it's much more likely that we see further capitulation, especially again being that and kind of looking at the chart here on the daily. Again, this is a falling wedge, but we've essentially got a rising wedge being operated on there. So the likelihood that this breaks down pretty strong. We've got a daily sell signal still. Same concept here. If I drew out some trend lines here, that's a falling wedge. Well, actually, in this case, this one's a falling wedge, so this one will eventually break upwards. But this thing here, it's as close to a rising wedge as you can get, or you could even call it a rounded top pattern at the moment. Maybe this little segment here, just from here to here, maybe we could call that a falling wedge, which should pop up. But the same concept here. I'm looking at it saying, all right, well, if it's a falling wedge, I've got a touch there, we got a touch here. This will be a third touch. If we count the original touch here, where if we drew the line, that's four. So again, typically by the time you see four touches, you're either breaking out to the upside or falling down through it. Well, if that ends up being the case, then yeah, we got some more downside coming. Do I know this for sure? No. At this point, it's anybody's guess. But same thing here. Let's look at the MACD. We got a rising channel formed on the MACD daily, which is now curling to a sell as well. Yeah, we got a good chance that there's more downside coming. Would I like to think that at least from a MACD or RSI standpoint, we put in a higher low than what these lows over here were? Yeah, I'd certainly like to think so, because we've had so much upward momentum here on the indicator. If that ends up being the case, well, on a positive note, that would get us some possible bullish divergence on a daily chart, which to a large extent we've had. Don't get me wrong, we've had it. It's showing bullish divergence, upward pricing action with a downward or upward RSI with a downward sloping price action. But again, it hasn't really played out yet. So that's the best I could tell you for now. The only other thing I wanted to kind of get to you guys here at the moment is at least the short term. And this is why at the end of the day, you want to get ahead of the game. You want to have an idea what may be coming. But at the end of the day, you can't predict it. You got to stay reactive to a large extent. Mentally preparing for two scenarios. Hey, this is my bearish thought process. Here's my bullish thought process, and these are the things I'm looking for. From a bullish standpoint, on the 4 hour, and really if I kick it over to the hourly, you'll see there's a potential inverse head and shoulders pattern forming here. So we'll get a lot of, if that ends up being the case, this is going to be a lot of chop through here as we've been dealing with. Um, the likelihood that it immediately, or well, let's say immediately gets over 32.8 is pretty slim. It's probably going to bounce up there, smack down a few times before it even has a chance to actually get up out of there. The positive thing about this candle I see there is that at least it looks to be trying to establish support on this volume node here. If it does establish support, potentially we've got an upside move coming. We do have support of the 21-day moving average, which is a positive. We do have a relatively full crash pattern completed here. Let me get rid of the Bali bands, and that'll help you see that a little better. We've got all of the moving averages have fallen below the 200, so our crash pattern is essentially complete. And then the other thing is too, and this is something I always try to remind you guys, like this is actually kind of cool how this stuff works out. Like, so we've got the MACD basically suggesting we've got a bullish divergence. That played out here. This low on the pricing action is much higher than this low was, but otherwise they are essentially equivalent lows on the indicator here, right? So there's our bullish divergence there. The other interesting thing is that when you use the stochastic RSI, and I draw trend lines there too. So this, I use orange, and we've talked about it before. This is my hourly indicator. We spent all this time above here, which again, as you can see, it didn't really amount to much. It still wasn't upwards pricing action, but now all of a sudden it fell off of there and it has now bounced back in. So if it reestablishes support on this line, that's where I could actually expect to see some potential upwards movement there. Same thing in the RSI box, right? So these are my hourly markers. It was in a rising wedge. It fell out of it. It back tested it twice. So you would think, all right, that's a double back test. That should push it down further, but it's already so oversold. It only has so far to go. So it bounced up out of there too, along with this bullish divergence, which you can see the bullish divergence playing out here on the Momo indicator as well too. Heavy downside here, higher low, less heavy downside here, and yet we put in a lower low. So all those are signs of bullish divergence. Now the question becomes, is this hidden bearish divergence where we've got a lower high but a higher high on the indicator? That's where I guess I would say to you, hey, at the end of the day, we shall see what plays out. But wow, you gotta love technical analysis. And damn, this market can be frustrating. Um, hey, let's hope that we get that full swing bull market back here at some point, so we can all breathe a sigh of relief. Uh, we'll catch you guys later.